Hello and Happy New Year to all of our listeners and to you as well, Geoff. It's the start of season 2 and we are super excited, not least because today we're chatting to Delicious Orie, otherwise known as DJ. Geoff, do you want to tell us a bit about DJ?
Happy New Year, everyone. I would love to. I need to take a deep breath before I start because there's a lot of achievements to get through and a lot of them make me exhausted just looking at them. So DJ graduated from Aston in 2020 with a first-class honours degree in economics and management. Since then, he's competed as a boxer on some of the world's biggest sporting stages. After first putting on his gloves at the age of 18, DJ won the English National Amateur Championship Super Heavyweight title, viewed as the most prestigious national amateur event. Following on from that, he completed his 4-year degree at Aston, won bronze at the European Championships in Yerevan in 2022, gold at the Commonwealth Games here in Birmingham, gold at the 2023 European Games, and competed as part of Team GB in the 2024 Paris Olympics. DJ, thank you for helping us kick off Series 2 of the podcast, and welcome.
It's great to be here.
So DJ, let's talk about that Commonwealth gold. It must have been really cool to win gold at your home games in Birmingham. Tell us about it.
Honestly, you know what? I actually think about that moment quite often, winning that gold medal, but not necessarily just winning that medal. It's the whole process towards the games. It was from even initially remembering that I was, to be told that the games will be held in Birmingham. I remember being told that. I think this was probably when I just about started boxing, and for me, it was like, okay, this is going to be one of the goals and one of the things that I've got to tick off the list in my boxing journey and career. So that was it then. As soon as I found out, right, it's going to be in Birmingham, I did everything I possibly could to get myself on there and get that gold medal. And just to have friends and family just there. Normally being on Team GB, you tend to, you travel all around the world. You have your competitions and your tournaments, your training camps. And the thing is, not hardly anyone's there that especially, big world championships and European championships. It's located in places that family members and friends can't really go to. It could be midweek, or it could be somewhere that some of my family's never even heard of. So having it in Birmingham was something extra special because there was no excuse for anybody that I know not to actually be there.
Did that bring a lot of extra pressure with it being almost a home contest? Or did that bring extra inspiration? Or was it kind of both?
I was just going to say it definitely both. There was that pressure. It was that expectation. Not only was it the fact that it's, home, it's local, literally 20 minutes drive from my house. It wasn't just that. It was the fact that Team GB have a very good track history of winning medals in the boxing, especially at the super heavyweight. So for me, it was almost like an expectation, even though I wasn't the most experienced starting boxing at quite a relatively late age, and to compete at that level, there was still that expectation there, and it was something that I just had to carry on my shoulders. But at the same time, it was inspiring. I was hoping and looking to inspire as many people as I possibly could. And I feel like from the conversations I had after the games, I feel like I reached out to a few people.
And did you find because you said you came to boxing relatively late compared to a lot of people, do you find that having a kind of a set calendar that you get when you're in those divisions with the Olympics and the Europeans and the Worlds, and when you've got that kind of calendar stretched out ahead of you, does that make it easier knowing that I'm on this path and here's what I have to do by this point? Or does it kind of make it harder because you know that if you slip at a particular point, that could be a complete derailing of your process?
I try not to catastrophize because it's very easily to get overwhelmed by these things. Even at a point where I am now, my journey is literally, I feel like it's just started, and there's so many things that I know that I'm going to achieve as a boxer, but I'm not thinking about the end point. I'm just thinking about the next thing. And that's exactly what I was doing from when I started boxing. To be honest with you, my first aim when I started, so I when I started university is really when I started, a few months before, and it was just, to win a regional title, just to be number one in my region. That was my first goal. And after I got that, I was then through to the nationals. That was then my next goal. And then after the nationals, it was to get ultimately assessed by Team GB and get another program. Basically, it's for them vetting you and finding out whether you can be and can cope with the demand of being a full-time athlete, because it's not easy. So it was just step-by-step progress. Even though I know what I wanted to achieve at the end, I made sure to dissect my goals and just take my time and just tick them off a box, one step at a time.
And those goals led you to competing in Paris. And I know that didn't have the ending you were looking for, but tell us about how you experienced that and how you've bounced back.
Paris was good. I remember, like I said, starting boxing. My goal, I was massively, I know we're going to talk about it later, but I was massively inspired by Anthony Joshua, and he was the reason why I started, actually. And he went through the Olympic route, and he got into the Olympics. So that was my thing. I was like, right, I'm going to get into the Olympics because he did it. I'm going to do it. And that was even before stepping into a boxing gym. I didn't even know where the closest boxing gym was, but I made a decision there and then. So when I was at that point, when I remember the build up, it was a year, got to 6 months, then it got to a month, then it honestly went like this. It was so quick. And I started to feel the world's attention on not just the Olympics, but specifically boxing as well. I just started to notice all of that. And I just always reminded myself about how I felt when I'm going to be in this moment, because it was all down to that moment. Everything that I've done, the early morning runs, the hard spars, the training when I didn't want to train, it was all on that moment when the whole world was watching. So for me, it was absolutely everything, and I was living in a moment as much as I possibly could. So that's the best way I can explain that experience. It was realizing to myself that all that hard work now has been put into this moment here.
Is that the same do you think, for a lot of top level sports people, that the importance of being in that moment?
I believe so. I think, what it is at the same time is it can be quite a paradox, because as an athlete, we're always looking for the next thing. So what's going to happen next? Like after we compete and we finish competing, it's like, all right, what's the next thing? It's very difficult sometimes to be present. Even in the Olympics, when I was in a holding camp for 2 weeks, it's like wanting the next thing, which is to actually compete, and then wanting the next thing. It's just continuous. So it's like this battle. And I believe the best athletes at the top level are the ones that are able to be present in the heat of the moment when the pressure is really on. And that's something that have been starting to grasp over the last particularly few years. The Commonwealth Games helping me massively, the Europeans and the Olympics, and I'll use it to my advantage as I progress in my career.
You've talked and touched on resilience a little bit there, and mindset, and thinking about how do you prepare, but also how do you move forward. You've said about that desire to hit the next goal, see what comes next. How do you maintain that commitment and that dedication and that positive mindset moving forwards?
One of the biggest things, what people ask me, they ask me this all the time: how do you stay motivated, or how do you keep that positive mindset? It's not easy. It's very difficult. And I have to be honest, I'm not motivated all the time. But I feel like what differentiates athletes, or differentiates myself from, trying to be the number one or the top 1%, is just making sure that whenever you feel that negative energy or that mindset, it's just making sure that you just push through regardless. So it's not necessarily how you feel, but it's the intent and the action that you take anyway.
What does day-to-day life look like when you're preparing for a competition, when you're getting into those stretches?
Day to day, it's relatively boring to a lay person, to be honest. I'd say 90% of my life as an athlete is spent with my coach and alone, really. The other 10% is the fun stuff that everyone sees on TV, but the rest, the running and all of that stuff, it's probably about 90% of it. And it literally consists of training, sleeping, and eating. And in a way, it can be, it can be seen as a little bit selfish, because sometimes I look back and I think, even for the preparation of the Olympics, it's like, it's always been me. I can't go out because I've got to do this, or I can't do this with this person because I've got to, it's always my not emotions, but it's always my priorities first. But unfortunately, I believe in order to get to that level as an athlete, that's the sacrifices that you've got to take. And I don't think it's just an athlete. I think it's just anybody wanting to stand out in whatever field that they're in, having to take enough sacrifices. So that's what I believe that I had to do, and I did.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier, but tell us about your biggest inspiration and how that inspiration has helped you to get to where you are now.
So I remember watching AJ when I was 18 years old on TV for the first time. So he won his world title. It was actually on the news. It was reported the day after. So I didn't know anything about boxing prior to that. I believe it was 2016, very early 2016. So he sort of like reached out to me. I knew, the heavyweight boxer like Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali, the greats, but they didn't inspire me to get into the ring. I appreciated them for who they were. They were amazing athletes, inspirational people. But they didn't reach out to me like Anthony Joshua did. He reached out in a different way. He was the one who indirectly sort of made me want to get in there and see what I can do myself. So, yeah, seeing him on TV, seeing how he carried himself professionally and how he looked, to me, I looked at somebody who had discipline inside and outside the ring, with the way he carried himself, the way he spoke, and the way he physically looked and how he performed at a high level. So for me, that was so inspiring. Finding out that he started boxing at 18 made me realize, let me give this a go and try it out. It was a calculated decision. It wasn't something I just jumped into. Coming from a academic background, I've never really been I used to play basketball, but for me, my life was, it still kind of is, education and making sure I study and get the highest grades I possibly can. So it was an educated decision. I decided, actually, looking at the market, this is the economics coming, looking at the market and looking what the product, there's not that many, there's high demand for what I can deliver in the next few years. If I dedicate myself to this craft, I am able to tap into this high demand. So that's exactly how I was thinking. I seen Anthony Joshua did it. So I was like, there's a demand for this, and it's possible to start 18. Let me give it everything I possibly can. And that's how the inspiration started. And here we are today.
You are part of, as you mentioned, a heritage of British boxers doing well at Commonwealth Games, at World Championships, at other tournaments. And for a lot of them, what comes next is turning pro. Now, I don't know if we can go into this. I don't know how much you'll be able to tell us, but do you have an idea of what the next steps are? Is there anything you can say about what's coming?
Yeah, for sure. My goal was always to turn professional after the Olympic Games. And that's the path we're on now. So I'm having conversations with my management and the rest of it, and we're pushing on forward. I went out to the biggest stage as an amateur, and now is my turn to get on the biggest stage as a professional boxer. And I know that I'm more than capable of doing that. So that's the next step. So yeah, most definitely professional boxing. It's a different kind of, they say it's boxing, but it's a different kind of sport. I'm aware of that, but I know that I'm more than able and capable to achieve great things in the sport, because I could simply use the dedication and commitment and the self-belief that I did as an amateur, starting boxing at 18 from absolute scratch, to somebody who's a lot more experienced, a lot more mature and level-headed, to take on the professional game as a heavyweight. As heavyweights mature a lot later than the lighter weights, so it puts me in the best position as a heavyweight boxer to take on the world. We're going to start with steps first, but definitely when in due time.
And do you think obviously there is a physical step up in terms of effort and focus, so that's the kind of the next level, or is it a question of just the hits are harder, or what's the leap?
Okay, so I guess explaining boxing, difference between amateur boxing and pro boxing to somebody who's not really aware of it or understands it. Amateur boxing is more like a sprint compared to a marathon, like It's like a Usain Bolt versus Mo Farah. It's still running, but it's slightly different. When you have 9 minutes to win a round, you will use different tactics because you have more energy reserves. You are able to expend more over those 3 rounds. When you have 8, 10, 12 rounds, you tend to reserve your energy a little bit more. Take your time, pick your shots. You can afford to lose a few rounds or a couple of rounds, as long as you win the bigger picture. It's a different strategy, the way you decide to approach the pro game. So I'm fully aware of that, and I know it's something that I need to transition into. But historically, a lot of amateur boxers who've gone onto the Olympics there's a positive correlation between them doing well as amateurs and then doing well as professionals, because it's not just the skill that they learn in the ring, but it's the discipline and the commitment they show. You can argue that it's very, very difficult to to get a medal, just to become an Olympian, because the stars have to align. It takes 4 years. It's first of all, it's every 4 years. You have to be you have to be the best in your country at your weight, and then you have to be it's got to have a perfect timing to the actual date of the Olympics. And then as well, when you get into the Olympics, you don't choose your opponents. It's all a draw. So it's all very randomized, and anything can happen at any day. Whereas the professionals, you can tend to sometimes cherry pick your opponents. It's not as easy as I said, as I'm expressing, but I'm not saying it's easier. It's an easier route. However, there is ways you can get to the top compared to the amateurs. Slightly different. So it's 2 slightly different routes, and that's the natural progression for me as a heavyweight boxer. It's very normal to earn your stripes as an amateur and then turn professional. But you can turn professional whenever, actually. So it's not like football where you need a professional contract. It's technically need a professional contract, but you can just turn pro whenever you like, as long as you are medically fit to do so. You can do it. So I decided when I started boxing, the amateur route was for me, because I needed to learn. It's a bit like an apprenticeship. I needed to learn the trade in order for me to take it to the next level as a professional, because in professionals, you can't really make a mistake. It will come at a greater detriment. You make a mistake. In amateurs, you lose somewhere in Lithuania that the bouts that no one's ever heard of. That's fine. You've learned from that. As a professional, everybody's watching, and everybody has a vested interest. Like, for example, the fight of Tyson Fury versus Usyk. Everybody knows that that's happening. So there's more on the line there. And with the professionals, there's more money involved, and it's basically your livelihood at stake. So it's not necessarily experiences. You got to put food on the table. So it can get serious in that aspect of things. So there's slight difference in the 2 professions. But you have amateur boxers that stay amateur. That's another it's quite, I won't say it's popular, but it happens all over the world. So, but for me, naturally, I tend to turn professional after already being in the Olympics.
DJ, what would be your song choice for the ring walk?
Oh, so I'm a massive fan of ABBA. I love ABBA, and one of my favorite songs, Winner Takes It All and Dancing Queen. The reason why, we'll have to speak for management. They're pushing back on it a little bit for the reasons I don't know why, because they're absolute bangers. The reason why I love that song, them 2 songs, is because they genuinely do remind me of my childhood. My parents, my dad would put that on in his car, and I would listen to it. When I moved to the UK, I was 7, 8, I could barely understand or speak English. So listening to that, I didn't understand what they were saying, but it was just passion. I just felt it, and now when I listen to it, of course, I get it. And it just reminds me how I felt from when I was a young kid, and the reason why I do what I'm doing today. So that's the reason. It's a bit of a deeper meaning than it just being ABBA, but it's just the emotions that it brings out of me.
That's great. Aimee, after you.
Fire that question right back at you guys. What would you guys go for?
So a colleague of mine said that my ring walk song should be Nina Simone's Feeling Good.
Okay.
Just to psych out the opponent.
Nice. That's a good one, to be fair. That is a good one.
For me, it's The End by The Doors. Partly because it's got a kind of a spooky quality, and partly because it's quite ambiguous about who it would be the end for. Because really, I think it would quite likely be me. if I was going anywhere near a ring. So I think that'd be very appropriate.
I like it though. Mind games from both of you, playing those mind games.
That would be all I had.
That's the number one, the only strategy. Hopefully it works.
That's it.
Great. I have loved, DJ, the fact that you have brought elements of the macroeconomics, the project management, the planning, the calculated risk taking, all of that into how you've described your sporting career so far and the plans you've got moving forward. And you mentioned that you were constantly learning and a fan of education. So I wonder what comes next alongside the sport. So DJ, the business person, DJ, the educator, what comes next?
You know, with where I want to go as a professional boxer, it will have to take full commitment. You know, I have to give every ounce of energy and possible attention. I'm lucky to have a very supportive family to make sure I get to that point. However, boxing is not competitive boxing is I believe it's a young man's sport and it doesn't last forever. You know, I've still got the rest of my life to live. So of course, I'm thinking about the future. And do you know what? My absolute dream job, and if it wasn't for the money, would be a lecturer. I would love to be a lecturer of economics at university. I'll have to brush up on my economics, macroeconomics, and my algebras and formulas that I learned in the last year of uni. But definitely, that's something that I would love to do afterwards. But you know, it comes with making sure that my team look after me, and I don't take. And it sounds a bit morbid, but I don't take too much damage in the ring in order to be able to pass on then some knowledge to people.
I'm sure the team would love to have you back in economics delivering guest lectures. So you're welcome anytime you want, DJ.
Amazing.
With the boxing coming relatively late, and you were already on a certain path, before that moment of inspiration, before that moment when you felt AJ reach out and kind of inspire you, was there a kind of a path you were already planning? You seem to me like someone who looks ahead, who plans what they're doing, who's hungry for the next step. Did you have a particular path, or had you not quite made up your mind and then the boxing appeared at just that particular moment?
So I'll be honest, this is where it starts to get deep, because it gets quite real. So when I started boxing, there was a big reason, and it was a mixture of different things. Growing up, I never was involved in anything like mixed martial arts or any contact sport. You know, my sport actually was basketball, which is non-contact sport. So I was still an athlete. I was still active, and I was an active teenager and child, but I was never involved in combat sport. None of my family were involved in that, friends, nothing like that. And I was very much a teacher's pet at school. I remember, because I coming to the UK when I was 7. My goal since I was 7 years old coming to UK was to get into university. That was it. That was because I knew that was something that I know you could just feel that it's something I want to basically say thank you to my parents for just giving me a better life here in the UK. So for me, university was my number one goal. And that was it all the way through my teenage years. I was working hard in school, sixth form. And then it got to year 13. So when we were just about transitioning into going to university, when I was hit my first hard lesson in life, which is like sometimes life doesn't go your way. You can work so hard, so dedicated. You know, I had really good A levels, and I was really gunning for really, study economics at school, at uni. But I was told that unfortunately I won't be able to get student finance at the time, because at the time I didn't hold a British passport because of my residency and all that stuff. So it was basically I was gonna get one, but later on, probably around now, 2024, 2025, something like that. So I was absolutely gutted because I couldn't get my uni funded. And on top of that, I was a big basketballer. My dreams was to go play basketball in the NBA. I couldn't do that either because I didn't have the papers to go out there and study and play, get a scholarship and play. You know, I had friends that went out there and had scholarships at the time. So for me, I was absolutely heartbroken because it was something I worked really hard for. And as a child, you don't really understand. You know, when you work really hard, I say child, I was about 18, 17. I didn't really understand the fact that when you work really hard for something, you still don't get it for reasons that's completely out of your control. So It was when I seen AJ and I seen what he achieved. It was the decision that it was a kind of a mixture of frustration, anger, but at the same time, it was this like new road and path that I could potentially take to allow me to still achieve great things. So that's what the decision was when I was 18. You were saying about the decision. What was the reason I started? It was a deeply rooted decision. And I'll be honest with you, it didn't really matter the sport. It could have been, it could have been anything. But again, I used logic. Tennis, did the research. You need to be like 7 years old to play that and be good. Same with golf, etc. And the list goes on. And then I was looking, and then Anthony Joshua came in at the right, perfect time. I don't know, it was like the stars aligned. It was just like, yep, he just came. I did the research. I happened to be a heavyweight. I happened to be 18 years old. I happened to really have this strong hunger, discipline, and determination to go to the top. And it was boxing. So I was like, right, okay. Never took a punch in the face before, but I'm just going to do it. However it feels, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to do it. And that's how it started.
It strikes me, DJ, that you've taken your fair share of metaphorical punches to the face over your kind of childhood and the experiences you've had leading up to that decision to go into boxing. And I wonder how those experiences of being knocked back, of not getting what you wanted at the time, of working hard and then having something taken away from you outside your control, how has that helped fuel your sporting career? How does that help you today?
Do you know what? I know at the time when it happened, and it was like a roadblock. I had to go somewhere else, another roadblock. At the time, I was so passionate. Now looking back in hindsight, 27 now, and I was 18. I had that fire of energy within me that whatever happened, I'm going to just break through it. Whatever barriers I get, I'll break through it. I didn't even realize that it was, even though it did hurt at the time when there were barriers, and even though I put a lot of effort to get over those barriers, it didn't feel like a lot of effort because I found my passion and desire, which is, you could say, is to be the best boxer, but it was to prove to myself that I can achieve great things. That's all it was. And I was denied, and I was like, no, I'm just going to do it regardless, one way or the other, somehow. And now I look back in hindsight, I think that's what it was. So every time I go through, I always say this to myself as well, even experiencing the Olympics or being a world champion in the next few years, whatever it is, I don't think I would go through harder times than I did when I was between, I'd say, age of 18 and probably second year, third year of uni, because that was the most difficult time. That was when I've had, obviously, being a student as well, no money, being in a complete overdraft, having no one believe in you as well. Absolutely nobody. Like, you're just some 18-year-old that happens to start boxing. Everyone thinks just a phase is going to wear out. So no one believes in you. You had to build it yourself. And so that was the hardest point. And then on top of that, of course, doing a degree like economics, having to do that on top of training and then not being able to work to support yourself. So luckily I've got great parents that were able to support me here and there. And again, that was tough because I knew for them, they had to work hard for their money. It wasn't easy for them to give me an extra £100 or £200 every month or whatever for me to get some food or, pay the rent or whatever. So when I think of the things I'm going through now, I'm thinking to myself, I don't think I'll ever experience hardship that I did from 18 to about 20, 21. And I believe that was the hardest time. So that's what pulls me through. The problems I have now, problems are relative. I probably still feel the same way as I did when I was 18, 19. But if you look at it objectively, that was when it was really hard. Now it's easier because I have a path. I've got people that believe in me. It's much clearer. I've built momentum. I've just got to carry that momentum on. The hardest part is starting that momentum. That's difficult because no one is going to start it for you. You're going to do it yourself. And I was lucky because when I started, I didn't even realize I was building that momentum. I just did it because of that passion. So I don't know if it's luck. I couldn't tell you, or maybe it was just a personality thing or a mixture of the environment and just myself as a human being, my DNA or whatever. But that's just how it happened.
DJ, thank you so much. This has been a fascinating conversation. I've learned a huge amount. Before we wrap up, we've got a couple of very quick fire questions which we like to have to round off the episodes. We're mixing them up a little bit for the second season. So, quick fire question. If you could have anyone in the world, dead or alive, from now or from history, on your team, supporting you in the ring, in your corner, who would it be?
Oh, you said it's quick fire. Man, there's so many people. I'll have to pick someone who's been resilient. I'll say somebody like, and he's got nothing to do with boxing, but somebody like Nelson Mandela, I believe, somebody who's a sheer embodiment of resilience, I would have in my corner. Yeah.
Good answer.
Brilliant. And I'm going to take you back to your Aston days, if I may. And you came out with a first class degree, tough times, but also hopefully enjoyable times. What was your favourite Aston memory?
Oh, my favourite Aston memory. To be honest, I've got a few. I'll say it's not one point, actually. I think so. I actually lived in halls throughout the year, so years of my time, and I met so many new people. And the one memory I have, or collection of memory I have, that really stands out to me and puts me in a real happy place is a group of flatmates that was, still friends now with them, still talk, and they've gone to do amazing things all over the world. But it's my group of flatmates, that the memories that we're able to build together. They understood my journey and what I wanted to achieve. And at the same time, I got to learn so many new things from them. They were from all over different parts of the world, like Vietnam, China, and they were just great people. So for me, the greatest memory I would say is the connections I was able to build with them, because I was becoming an adult and I was learning that there's a big wide world. And, because some of the students that were at the halls with were like foreign exchange students. So I was able to learn that there's such a big world and different opinions, and people have different thoughts on the different subjects, and you just have to respect it. So I would say that's probably my most memorable memory.
DJ, thank you so much for joining us. We've learned so much, and we're really excited to see what you do next. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Geoff and Aimee. Appreciate it.
Listeners, it's great to be back on the airwaves. We'll be back with another episode next month. In the meantime, please do rate the podcast and leave us a review. It really helps us out. We will see you in February.